The Hansi Flick era started off with a victory as Barcelona took all 3 points in a 2-1 victory over Valencia at the Mestalla. And in this video we're going to take a look at the tactics and maybe how Barcelona, or Hansi Flick in this case, are trying to have a different pressing system to accommodate Robert Lewandowski's age. And in this video we're going to take a look at all of that with the tactics. As always, do subscribe to the channel. It's going to help us a lot to get this family to grow bigger. We upload weekly Barcelona tactical content only. Barcelona didn't really have a hard time building up from the back. If we did see a high press from Valencia commencing, if they would press, if the ball went to the centre back and eventually end up with the full back, when they did press, we saw that Casado or Rafinha, depending on what side they built through, would get the ball in the half space and they would drive up the pitch. But because Valencia were pressing with a front two where they would sit on Marc Bernal, Barcelona had their centre back spread extremely wide next to the half spaces, and Ter Stegen would even come in and operate as a centre back. The build-up was fairly reminiscent of Pep Guardiola's era, right, where we had a lone pivot to actually take up the ball, and Casado, who was actually a second pivot, were higher up the pitch. And here you see, as the press went on, Balde and Inigo were pressed. You would see Bernal remain, but Casado was the one who was receiving the ball in the half space higher up the pitch. And look how wide Inigo and Pau Cubarsí is in this instance, where the Valencia forward has a lot of space and Marc-Andre Ter Stegen actually as a third centre back as well. Like we saw in pre-season, the centre backs were encouraged to be very adventurous and drive up the pitch. And that was to draw players out of their position and ultimately find Marc Bernal still within the midfield. So central progression is very, very important to Mr. Hansi Flick. And Ter Stegen was also involved fairly high up the pitch, where he would have Marc Bernal circulate and twist and turn just behind the front two, where he would make space for the like of Marc Casado to be dropping into. So fairly interesting tactics from Mr. Hansi Flick. But we also did see that Marc Bernal or Casado would drop into these half spaces, but they wouldn't stay there. As the ball moved and circulate, then he would drop into that space right over there. But as the ball was circulating, we saw that Marc Bernal were encouraged to go higher up the pitch and receive the ball in these areas right over here. But because Casado dropped, that pushed Balde up and made Ferran Torres the viable option to receive within the half space. Marc Bernal was really the first option for Barcelona centre-backs, as Hansi Flick surely must be enhancing or encouraging central progression for the team throughout the middle, right? And you can see Bernal was dropping into the half space even though he was the lone pivot, and then you can see he was making space for the like of Casado to come into that space and be getting the ball. And Cubarsí, you can see he is passing for Marc Bernal. So the central progression, like I said, is essential for Mr. Hansi Flick. And if the ball goes through the center, we are fairly close to the goal. And here you see that Inigo is passing the ball to Ferran Torres. But in this case, it's actually Marc Bernal who's dropping in between the center backs, which is allowing Ferran Torres to receive in the half space. And you can see Casado dropping into his beloved left center back position in order to draw players out of position and allow the ball to play up the pitch. But here's why I think Barcelona was struggling, because in the build-up phase for Valencia, you saw that Robert Lewandowski was sitting deeper with Rafinha on their double pivot, and it was actually Varane and Lamine Yamal that came onto the centre-backs. So that when the ball circulation would go on for Valencia and they would actually get the ball into these full-backs, you could actually see that Alejandro Balde was pushing up to come and press. And then the centre-backs and the backline could just sort of over to the left-hand side in this case in order not to leave space. But Koundé couldn't do this the same way that Balde did it, so Barcelona often ended up with these 2-on-1 situations on Koundé, where Valencia had a great time putting it in behind him. In this frame right here, we can clearly see Robert Lewandowski sitting on the double pivot with Rafinha, to mark them. You see Lamine Yamal and Ferran Torres high up the pitch to mark their centre-backs, but Ferran Torres didn't do a great job of getting these players to play on one side. He was often way too slow and they could easily switch, with Robert Lewandowski joining Rafinha in that midfield. And you can see Koundé had to come out in order to get into this contest, and then Cubarsí has to run over and cover for Koundé. So it was really a weird pressing structure. You can see here again, now you see Ferran Torres trying to press from one side, and then Balde has to come up high in order not to let the fullback receive. To be fair, Flick did try to look for solutions as the fullbacks were overwhelmed, and therefore Barcelona returned to a 4-2-3-1/4-3-3 situation. But soon after that, Flick returned to Robert Lewandowski being in midfield, I think because he's not effective, and Casado was the one who was pressing then and helping out with Inigo coming onto the striker if need be. However, for me personally, I would have had Casado be the one to press the fullback, however at an angle while cutting the passing lane out, and then Balde could have easily dealt with that winger one-on-one. So here you can see Barcelona reverting back to the 4-2-3-1 situation with Marc Bernal and Marc Casado being the ones, of course, as you would expect to be, right? And you can see here still Rafinha and Casado are the one backing up the press, as Casado are coming up a little bit higher in order to help out on the touchline as well. The main objective for Barcelona down the right hand side was to get Lamine Yamal in these one-on-one situations, with Rafinha often being the one to run ahead of him to get onto the byline. However, these two along with Koundé would also shift their positioning as they would confuse the flanks there. And the times when Rafinha had to play in the middle, you saw that Lamine Yamal many a times had two players on him, with one player being drawn out by the centre back, and then Koundé would just run into the space that would be left by the centre back if they would both cover Lamine Yamal. However, with Ferran on the left side was fairly simple to get Ferran Torres in behind the right back, and if the situation would arise as where Ferran Torres would invert, then you would see Alejandro Balde get in behind, and this was way more successful than getting Ferran Torres in behind. In this frame right here, we can clearly see that Lamine Yamal has two players on him, literally. I mean, literally, this kid is a superstar. Everybody just wants to pick on him and just defend him properly, right? And look how Koundé is running, and look how bamboozled one of the midfielders are right here with Koundé getting in behind. So this was actually in the second half when this happened with Lamine. And look at how Balde stays deep and get Ferran Torres in behind and getting onto the ball. You know, in my opinion, Ferran was awful in this game. Honestly, awful. Just simply awful. And look at how Rafinha is running in ahead of Lamine Yamal into the half space. Of course, he's going to be one-on-one, but Rafinha is just making that run either way to be an extra option. And here you, of course, see that Lamine Yamal is going to be in a one-on-one situation with that player right there. And this could be the best for Barcelona. I think Lamine could have done more, but at the same time, this is the first game of the season. And you can see here in this game, again, you can see Koundé very close to the touchline with Rafinha in the half space and Lamine. So that was the main objective down the right. Guys, I just want to take this time and apologize to you, if you heard some cars or some wind, birds, voices, music playing. I live in a rowdy area, so it's quite noisy where I live, and I still wanted to record this video. So just imagine yourself, this is the Pat McAfee show where you hear some people in the background. Maybe, I don't know, maybe you will hear them, but do let me know your comments down below. What do you make of this game, and what do you think of Flick's ball? It does seem to me that we're gonna need a lot of patience, because a lot could go wrong with the way we're playing, very dynamic, a lot of long balls, a lot of turnovers happening. But as always, do subscribe to the channel. It's going to help us a lot. Do let me know your thoughts. We may do another video on this game right here.